We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
As a young boy, Jason Moon found a clever way to manipulate computers for immediate personal benefit.
I sort of started in a way hacking on cash machines, getting the cash machine to just spit out money. It was much easier back then than it is now.
But after a turning point in his life, Jason decided to use his skills for the public good. Following 9/11, he joined a group of young hackers who were determined to pry open networks and unmask the organisations and individuals who'd financed the attacks. The result, he says, was a list of names handed over to US intelligence officials. Since then, governments and corporations have caught up with online hackers, but only to a point. Almost every week we hear how systems are infiltrated, from newspapers to movie studios to government agencies. Cyber attacks carried out by countries as well as armed groups such as the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Is there no effective way to stop these attacks? Will hackers always be a step ahead? And what can so-called good hackers do to fight back? Today on Talk to Al Jazeera, Jason Moon, a hacker who knows how this game is really played. Jason Moon, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. Perhaps you could start by explaining exactly who you are and what you do, because the world of the hacker is a virtual world by its very nature, and most people don't really understand what it's all about.
Well, for my profession, I'm a security tester, a pen tester, you call it in the industry. So I do digital forensics and pen testing, which is just security testing. Sometimes I might advise or design security systems, but usually I'm breaking into them, testing them, ethical hacking effectively. Sometimes I do work with private individuals because they usually working as part of a security detail, helping to secure that individual's emails or phone or something like that, or just advising them on how to operate in the digital world in a safer manner, especially because there's been a lot of high-profile hacks of VIPs, stuff like that. So been doing that a bit as well.
And how did you actually start off hacking? How, when and why? I presume you were quite young.
Yeah, I was quite young. I had an aptitude for it from a very young age. So when I was first exposed to technology, really, so I took apart the TV, put it back together again, stuff like that. And then when I got my first computer, I dove right in. So I started from quite a young age. I didn't really know back then, what was legal, what was illegal. I was so young, 5 years old really and upwards. So I sort of had a carte blanche to just play in this adventure playground of technology. I basically, that's what I did. And then as I got older, I realized obviously some things are illegal, some things are not. Some things maybe have ramifications for another human being. You have to be careful what you do.
But presumably you've broken into various organisations or companies without realising that what you were doing was wrong. What actually did you do?
Well, I sort of started in a way hacking on cash machines, not stealing people's PIN numbers or anything like that, but just getting the cash machine to just spit out money. It was much easier back then than it is now to do that kind of thing. I kind of started like that just because I wanted money to buy Star Wars figures and things like that. So it sort of seemed an obvious way of getting it. Also, fruit machines, used to hack into fruit machines. And Space Invaders, we used to have amusement arcades back there when I was a kid, and I didn't really have the money to pay for them. So I figured out how to dupe the coin drop and, play computer games for free in the amusement arcades and spend the whole day there. And that sort of escalated into lock picking, actually. So I would pick the lock on things as well, get into things like that. And then when I became older, something happened which really made me see the negative ramification of hacking, and that kind of birthed my career as a security professional.
What happened?
My girlfriend had to hand in her thesis for her law degree, and her computer was hacked. So she kind of lost everything, and it was quite devastating to her, really. And obviously a huge inconvenience and a financial drain, because you've paid for your degree and all the rest of it, and then maybe you have to take a year again. So that sort of really, the anger of that, born out of the anger of that, I knew I had the expertise that I could sort of constructively do something to counteract that. sort of thing. And I think that's what made me get into that kind of a career. At least it started to gravitate me in that direction. That's probably the key event that started it all off.
When you were still quite young, you joined this organisation called Young Intelligent Hackers Against Terrorism, which was founded by the man we now know as Kim.com. What was that organisation all about?
Yeah, that's right. It initially started with one remit, really, which was to assist the intelligence community in tracking down the perpetrators of the 9/11 attacks. Back then, I don't know, the intelligence community wasn't really that au fait with hacking and things like that.
Well, it's quite a while back, 2001.
It's quite a while back, and there was still, I think, this really huge divide between the hackers and the law enforcement community. They hadn't quite really caught up yet in the way that they have now. So basically we just thought we'd help them. They're quite a slow machine to get going. They need international warrants and all the rest of it. They didn't perhaps have the expertise. They could do some stuff, but tracing the finances of the attack and stuff like that, what we were seeing on the news that they were having problems with, or they would say that they wanted to do, but you could sort of get the feeling that they were having certain problems, or they could do with assistance in certain areas.
So some members of this organisation did basically quietly help the intelligence services.
Yeah. A dossier was put together of basically movements of money and people's names and stuff like that, financiers effectively, and that was sort of anonymously handed to them. Here it is, we've probably broken hundreds of international laws, but here it is if you want it. Yeah.
Presumably there was no comeback for those members who'd done that the intelligence services just took the information.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
You didn't stay with that group for very long, but what did you learn about what else they were doing in Jihad?
Well, for me personally, things like you call it cyber graffiti, things like that. So if if there's any Muslim websites, you deface them. Some members of the group were doing things like that. It's not very constructive. I mean, it's just racism, really. I can understand perhaps where it came from, born out of the anger of the 9/11 attacks, and everyone was trying to sort of marshal together, didn't really know what to do, and thought, what can we do? Just going after any company just because it happens to be a Muslim company is obviously ridiculous. So as soon as the initial job was completed, and people just sort of had idle hands, I kind of got out of it then, yeah. And it very quickly fizzled away actually after that. And I guess sort of the precursor to something like Anonymous. So that's kind of what it's developed into now in a way. I mean, a lot of those personalities and stuff, those kind of people, probably now, in Anonymous.
Each country obviously has its own intelligence services, its own military, its own hackers. The question that general public might ask is, if they have this ability among the intelligence communities, why isn't it that more of the sites of fundamentalist extremists like ISIL, why are those sites still running? Presumably the hackers have the ability to get into those sites and take them down.
They do. I mean, Anonymous has sort of declared war against them, and they've taken a few websites down and stuff like that. But again, I don't know whether really the sort of average member of the public has a comprehension that a website isn't the organisation itself. So, I mean, hackers know that. So it's kind of a tit for tat thing. If you take down someone's website, it's not really doing them any harm. So it's not really what you would go after. If anything, you want to keep the website up because you don't want to let them know that you're getting into their system and trying to, we call it doxing them, like revealing their identity. So, you don't want to let them know that you're in there. So actually it's not very clever to take down a website. You can take down a website, but it's just the website. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've got into a database or you've got their emails or something like that. You may well have, but generally speaking, it's just the website. You can put it back up just like that. There'll be a backup.
So you say that the security services, it's not really in their interest to actually take down websites run by extremists such as ISIL. But presumably they also do have the ability to intercept their communications, possibly stop the recruitment, things like that. Is that possible? Is it done?
Yeah, that's definitely done. I mean, obviously you've got Anonymous declaring war against the terrorists and taking down some of their websites and stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a website. So it's a bit tit for tat. We take down your website, you take down ours, that kind of thing.
So it's the communication that's actually
but the intelligence
important.
community, are more interested in cracking into the email systems or encrypted communication systems, stuff like that. That's what they'll go after.
When you look at the recent attacks that we've had in Paris with so many people killed, the security services there have been accused of failing in their surveillance and failing of being able to predict what was going to happen. Is it just too difficult for national security services, intelligence services, to monitor absolutely every communication coming from those who are being surveyed?
I think it's very difficult for them because they can't look at everything all the time. I think they've almost shot themselves in the foot because with this huge data collection, I mean, even the head of, I forget his name, but the head of CIA's tech division, they did a presentation and he was even saying that we have a problem right now in actually querying the huge data that we've got. That's the dilemma they have at the moment. So the intelligence, NSA, the GCHQ, they gather this huge amount of data. They almost gather everything. But that doesn't really help you if you haven't got the tools to query it in the correct way or to spot it. How do you even spot a trend? I mean, what algorithm do you use to predict something like, the attack in Paris? It's so difficult. So I think there's almost an over-reliance on the digital snooping, hacking kind of intelligence gathering. Perhaps they've neglected the spy with his feet on the ground in the field type of, James Bond kind of stuff, if you like. I think it needs to be more balanced, not just over-relying on the hacking. Otherwise you get this kind of problem.
You were saying also that some groups don't go the encrypted route anyway. They find it easier, I guess, to blend in with the rest of the communications that are... what way?
That's right. Sometimes it's better just to hide in the white noise, the traffic of the internet, innocuous traffic. Because, if I want to plan an attack with you and normally we talk normally over our mobile phone or whatever, and then suddenly I start encrypting everything, that's quite a big red flag. We're obviously saying something that we don't want the authorities to look at. So obviously they're going to be running stuff which is going to spot stuff. That is one way you can, red flag something. Okay, this data is now suddenly being encrypted where it wasn't before. Let's look at it now. So often it's better, and what we've seen actually typically in the past with some terrorist networks is that they communicate in a non-encrypted fashion or just using encoded kind of terminology but not actually encrypting the data. Not encrypting it digitally and just hiding it, just chatting in chat rooms and stuff, online dating sites or wherever it might be, adverts in the newspaper, stuff like that. So it looks completely innocuous and there's no way you would ever think to look there for it. That's kind of safer than red flagging your communication by heavily encrypting it.
The age-old question and discussion and debate is always centred around privacy versus security of a nation. Where do you stand on that, and which way do you think the world is developing at the moment? Are people going to have less privacy but more security in the future?
It's a really difficult question. I think that we are generally moving in an unhealthy trajectory, and we are definitely moving in the direction of the security state, the sort of 1984 kind of scenario. And these attacks which happen are awful, but it's a shame that we're going to lose our privacy and perhaps we're not going to be allowed anymore to even use encrypted communication, chat programs or whatever. I think people should be allowed to use those things, because as soon as you ban those or insist that the companies build backdoors into them, those things can be obviously sabotaged by the hackers and taken advantage of, and that's not going to be good for all of us. So it's a difficult balance, but I think the balance is wrong at the moment. We're getting too neurotic, too paranoid, and the heavy hand of the state is really taking away too many of our privacy rights. That's my personal belief.
This modern day cyber warfare, because that's effectively what it is that then almost a game of cat and mouse, that the fighters out there have the ability themselves to get into the intelligence services networks and vice versa? Is that how it works, or is that too simplistic?
Yes, I mean, the Pandora's box has really been opened with this kind of cyber warfare now. It took on a whole new level when Stuxnet came out. So that was, I guess, the world's first digital weapon. So,
and what does that do?
Well, it was designed by CIA and Mossad to actually break into nuclear power stations and sabotage them. So, and there have been various iterations of it after then. It's developed quite quickly, that sort of a strain of virus, that kind of weapon. So yeah, I mean, intelligence communities can now make preemptive strikes anonymously. So you can render a country disorientated. You could, in theory, make a Chernobyl event happen or something like that, or just shut down a power grid.
And that is possible.
Yeah, that's very, very much possible now. So there would obviously be huge disorientation within that country and real strain on the systems. And then you can, make your land-based attack if you wanted to do that. If that was part of your, strategy in the theatre of war or whatever, that's just one asset that you can employ, your sort of cyber warriors or whatever. But also, obviously, it's quite worrying in terms of terrorism, because once you've opened that Pandora's box, the code is out there, anyone can use it and modify it, and that's what we've begun to see happening. So,
in what sense? Where have you seen that
well,
of thing
like
happening?
Stuxnet was used against Iran by the Americans. There's been attacks against American power stations and by what we believe to be, Russia. And it's kind of like a modification of the programs which they themselves initially created.
It all sounds, to people who don't understand that world, it sounds almost like something out of a movie, a bit far-fetched. Are you surprised then, given that the knowledge and the ability of various hackers to do all of this, are you surprised that more hasn't happened?
I think quite a lot happens that people don't necessarily know about. I think hacking happens a lot more than people realise. It's only, you have to look at the motivations of the hacker. So a lot of hacking is financial, I'm talking about criminal hacking here. A lot of hacking is, obviously, the motivation is to rob an institution or to rob someone. So you do feel that, but you feel that on the charges on your bank charges. And obviously it's not in the bank's interest to tell you how much money they hemorrhage from all the hacking, how much they lose. They just charge you for it to make up the difference. If you knew that a bank was being hacked a lot, then you'd probably go to another bank that doesn't get hacked so much. So they keep it a deathly secret. But it does happen a lot. I mean, that's the industry I worked in, so I've seen how much these organisations get hacked. And there's a phenomenon called phantom employees, where you can actually set up fake projects within huge organisations. Because they're so big, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. You can set up projects, project managers, consultants, and you can get them, they're all paid wages, but they're all phantom employees that don't really exist.
Do you think the financial industry has been slow to realise the threat of hacking? Because all the technology companies for years have been effectively opening up their doors, if you like, saying, come on, try and hack us. If you can do it, we'll pay you for it.
Yeah, that's an approach that people are starting to use now, or that people have been using, but that does help in the evolution of your security countermeasures, because people will find a vulnerability and let you know about it.
It sounds risky, because the person who says, okay, I actually want $20,000, not the $10,000 you promised me, and then I'll tell you.
Yeah, it would be risky. It would be risky for the hacker as well, though. It would be
Why?
risky for the hacker as well, because you've broken the law, and to get given that money, the strange thing about hacking into banks and things like that, it's not that difficult to hack into the bank. It's difficult to get your hands physically on the money. That's always where people get caught.
The more advanced we've become with our computer technology and our networks, it seems the more vulnerable we also are.
That's right, yeah. Human nature, that something always has to happen. We have to have the sort of digital 9/11, the digital Pearl Harbor event before people sort of really sit up and take notice. So unfortunately, that's obviously what's going to happen.
That's almost an apocalyptic kind of look into the future. For you, what would something like that, what would it resemble? What would it be that?
This is the $1 million question. You just never know. It's always completely something you never thought of. You know, I think because we have a real problem with terrorist attacks against Western countries, it probably will take that form. As opposed to just a sort of stunt hack, because you get a lot of kind of hackers just doing stunt hacks to prove that something could be done, and to say, look, you should fix this, or just for fun, but relatively harmless.
But it proved what could be done.
Yeah, exactly. But say those hackers, so when all cars are networked, say they made every single car in London shut down, and put something in there to just break the computer or corrupt the computer system in the car so that no one could fix their car for a few weeks. What would that do to the economy of London? You could crash the country doing something like that. You see what I mean? So it's something like that could potentially happen.
Are you aware of high-level stuff taking place at the moment to try to prevent that? Because presumably if you're predicting that, there's going to be people within governments, in national security services, who must be working on strategies to deal with that.
But a lot of what they're doing is, that, as you were saying, trying to figure out and simulate and project what could this attack be, and then how do we prevent that attack or deal with that attack or cope when we're under that attack. In my experience, it seems to be that approach. So it's not really dealing with the cause of the problem. I'm talking purely in a technological sense here, of course, but the cause of the problem are the fundamental caveats of the security technology that we employ today. Those need to be changed. I mean, we're still using the same technology today. Internet technology and all that, the way it actually works hasn't really changed since day one the internet was invented. I'm sure we can all put our heads together and come up with some system which is safer, more secure, and get rid of the damn password.
You're really against the password, aren't you? Yeah.
Well, as a hacker, I know
it's the easiest, is it?
It's just, everyone sees these. There's always a newspaper article about the top 10 passwords used or something like that. I use online banking. They force you to do these incredibly ridiculous, convoluted password combinations. You can't remember that kind of thing. You have to write it down. Most people write it down on their computer, or email it to themselves, or have a Word file with their passwords, and you have to, because you can't remember these things. We need to get away from that system. So, we need two-factor authentication. We need a secure fob or token-based or biometric systems. There are other alternatives out there, but it's probably going to take a horrible attack to make people start thinking, we need to use something else.
A final thought from you. You spend your life, obviously, online and trying to deal with the virtual world and all that entails. And you've told me that you become obsessed when you've got a particular challenge or a particular job to do.
Yeah.
Is there ever a time where you actually just want to be totally offline? You don't want to be anywhere near a computer or electronic device?
It doesn't last very long. I probably have internet addiction. I do feel kind of, it's very difficult for me to not be online. I don't really check the things that most people check online. I don't really look at online news or things like that, or that much social networking. It sort of ebbs and flows. But a lot of the people I've met and that have become good friends are very international, and especially in the hacker community, where people don't really know people face to face. You just know them by their hacker alias, like their call sign. And you talk to those people a lot, and you bash ideas off them. I do a lot of online gaming. A lot of my life, I am a kind of product of this new generation, really, where I'm very much online based. A lot of my life is online, and a lot of the way I socialize and have fun is not exclusively, but a lot of it is online. So I do feel it, that it's missing when it's not there. Yeah, very much so. Probably not that healthy a thing, but it's just how I am.
Jason Moon, it's been fascinating. Thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Pleasure.
Thank you.